You know that feeling when a team meeting spirals into complete chaos or a big critical project suddenly just grinds to a halt for no apparent reason, leaving everyone baffled?
Oh, yeah, definitely. We've all been there.
Exactly. And what if those frustrating breakdowns aren't just about, bad leadership or simple miscommunication, but something far more foundational, something deeply biological, rooted in our very neurochemistry?
It's a pretty radical proposition, isn't it? It really challenges our usual ways of thinking about collective human behavior.
Totally.
So today we're embarking on this extraordinary deep dive into some really groundbreaking polymathic research. This is the work of Othniel Max Daves, and we're bringing in crucial supporting insights for people like Dr. Sora Shin and Stephen Porges.
And this isn't just another chat about standard psychology or sociology, is it?
No, not at all. It's about peeling back the layers, really getting into the hidden neurobiological underpinnings of how we connect, how we collaborate, and, well, unfortunately, how we fracture. As groups, as institutions, even as whole civilizations.
Okay, so our mission today is to really unpack how these seemingly subtle disruptions in one person's neurochemistry can actually radiate
Oh,
outwards
right, like ripples.
and cause these cascading failures in collective human systems. We're talking everything from the smallest team right up to the largest society.
Exactly.
We'll explore the surprising facts that really lay bare just how deeply our collective function, our ability to even interact coherently, is tied to our individual biological states.
And crucially, what this means for actually understanding dysfunction, not just in the microcosm of one mind, right? But in the macrocosms of human interaction.
Okay, let's unpack this because the implications here feel
Yep.
pretty profound.
What's truly fascinating here, and what makes Days' work so revolutionary, really, is how universal these principles seem to be, across scale.
Universal how?
Well, his central idea is a massive departure from how we usually compartmentalize things, individual well-being over here, collective function over there. He argues that our individual neurochemical states, and he focuses particularly on the precise regulation of GABA,
Which is the brain's main off switch, kind of.
exactly the main inhibitory neurotransmitter, and also the intricate functioning of our oxytocin pathways. He says these states don't just stay neatly inside our own nervous systems,
They leak out.
they radiate outward, almost like an energetic field, profoundly shaping everything from our subtle one-on-one interactions to the cohesion of our work teams, and even the behavior, predictable or not, of large institutions.
Wait, hold on. So, if I'm understanding this, it's not just about me privately feeling anxious or off kilter. My internal state, my anxiety, could literally be impacting the flow, the coherence of the entire team I'm working with.
That's the core idea.
Wow, that right there is a seismic shift from the traditional view, isn't it? Which usually treats individual struggles as isolated pathologies.
Right. Send someone to therapy, give them a diagnosis, problem contained.
Yeah, assumes it stops there. But if what's happening in one person's brain can truly biologically disrupt the psychology of many, then our collective emotional health, the social trust we share, the resilience of our organizations, it has to be reconceived.
As a biological commons. That's the term Daves uses.
A biological commons, like an ecosystem we all share.
Precisely. It implies these are incredibly fragile, distributed systems. They need conscious stewardship, ongoing repair, just like we've learned about environmental resources.
So this perspective totally reframes everyday struggles, doesn't it? In your team, your community, they're not just personal failings or bad apples.
Exactly. They're emergent properties of these complex, interconnected biological systems. It means we have to look way deeper than just surface behaviors or personality clashes.
So if your team feels like it's constantly struggling, it might not just be a communication problem. It could be a symptom of this deeper biological misalignment.
That's the implication, yes.
And to dig into these deeper layers, Daves uses what he calls a truly polymathic lens, which honestly is what makes this research so compelling and unique.
Absolutely. It's not just one discipline looking through its narrow keyhole.
Right.
We're talking about a rigorous interdisciplinary exploration. It boldly bridges fields that seem miles apart. Molecular biology, affective neuroscience, trauma psychology, social systems theory, organizational behavior.
That's a really ambitious scope.
It is. And the why behind this integrated approach is critical. It allows for a truly comprehensive model, one that connects these incredibly granular molecular mechanisms like how GABA regulation works at a cellular level or the subtleties of oxytocin pathways to the most complex collective phenomena, like why does a high-performing team suddenly collapse? Or even the hidden reasons for what he calls civilizational entropy, that slow decay of societal order.
So it moves beyond just single discipline explanations, which can be kind of narrow.
Exactly. It avoids being reductionist, trying to reveal a unified pattern that consistently transcends scale. It's about seeing the forest and the trees and understanding how the health of one deeply influences the other.
I often think of it like a master detective assembling clues from all sorts of specialists, you know? You wouldn't just send a forensic scientist to crack a complex case.
Right, you get one piece of the puzzle.
You'd need a psychologist for motives, a sociologist for group dynamics, maybe even a financial expert. Dave's is doing something similar, but for human systems, integrating all these diverse fields to crack the case of collective dysfunction.
A case that's definitely too complex for any one expert alone.
And if we connect this to the bigger picture, well, it suggests our current understanding of major societal problems might be fundamentally incomplete, maybe even dangerously incomplete without this integrated biological view.
It forces us to look at the whole human, not just fragmented parts, embedded within the whole system.
Okay, so let's zoom in on one of these really fascinating biological mechanisms Dave's highlights. Get3. It sounds almost like, I don't know, a secret code or something from sci-fi.
Yeah, it does have that ring to it, but it's very real and incredibly important. Think of it less like a secret code and more like a highly specialized vacuum cleaner or maybe a precise traffic controller for a really important chemical in the brain.
Okay, a vacuum cleaner or traffic controller. For our listeners who might not be neuroscientists, what exactly is Get3 in the brain? What's its core function?
So Get3, or more formally, GABA transporter 3, its other name is SLC6A11, is a membrane transporter protein. It's found all through our central nervous system. Its main job is to actively clear GABA.
Gamma-aminobutyric acid.
Right, the main inhibitory neurotransmitter. GAT3 clears it from the tiny spaces between neurons, the extracellular space.
So it's like the brain's cleanup crew, making sure GABA levels are just right, not too much, not too little, like maintaining a perfect internal balance.
Exactly. That's a great analogy. This critical function regulates what neuroscientists call inhibitory tone, basically maintaining that precise balance between the brain's go signals and stop signals.
Crucial for harmony, then.
Absolutely fundamental for ensuring everything fires together at the right time. When GAT3 works well, it shapes neural oscillations. Those are like the brain's internal rhythms. It's electrical pulses, things like gamma waves, and it synchronizes the activity of whole populations of neurons.
And that synchronization is key for things like focus and smooth movement.
Crucial for coherent thought, focused attention, smooth motor control, yeah.
So what happens when this conductor's baton, this cleanup crew, GAT3, gets disrupted? Where does that dysfunction show up, and what does it look like in different brain areas?
Right, so when GAT3 function is disrupted, it immediately throws off that crucial balance, and it leads to really distinct dysfunctions depending on the brain region involved.
Like where?
Okay, take the thalamus. That's a deep brain structure, kind of a sensory relay station. If GAT3 is dysregulated there, it can lead to severely disrupted sensory filtering, hyperexcitability, even susceptibility to seizures.
Wow, so like getting too much input, no filter, just noise.
Exactly, a constant, overwhelming cacophony.
Yeah.
Then you have the striatum, which is involved in habit formation and reward. Excessive GAT3-mediated inhibition there contributes to rigid, habitual, repetitive behavior patterns.
It's like being stuck in a loop, overregulated, inflexible.
Precisely. Lost all adaptive dynamism. And in the globus pallidus, which is part of the basal ganglia involved in voluntary movement, impaired inhibition leads to poor motor coordination and timing.
So a breakdown in actually doing things, executing movements.
A significant breakdown in execution, yes.
That's a really powerful image. It makes me think of the brain as this complex orchestra, and GAT3 isn't just one musician, it's the conductor's baton, making sure each section plays in rhythm, preventing noise like seizures or endless repetition or movements that just fall apart, really hammers home how essential this one protein is.
And that analogy, it extends beautifully, almost perfectly, to the macrocosm, to human interaction. Dave's, through his semiotic interpretation, sees these neuroscience findings as a powerful allegory for dysfunction in human work teams.
An allegory? How so?
Just as GAT3 maintains that coordinated activity across neural populations in the brain, human teams relied on what he calls Relational integrity mechanisms.
Relational integrity mechanisms, like the unspoken rules, shared understanding, trust, the stuff that holds a group together.
Exactly that, the social glue.
So, if the brain needs GAT3 to be coherent, a team needs something like social GAT3. What does that look like in a real team? Can we actually see these brain dysfunctions mirrored in group behavior?
Yes, absolutely. The parallels are striking. In a struggling team, reduced social GAT3 that break down in relational integrity directly mirrors the cognitive overload and communicative chaos. It's like the thalamus seizure risk analog.
Okay, how?
Too many inputs, no filtering, a total breakdown of shared focus, people talking over each other, interrupting constantly, no one really listening or synthesizing. It's just noise without meaning, a meeting where nothing actually moves forward.
Right, I've been in those meetings. And the striatum's repetitive behaviors, that rigid looping pattern, how does that show up in a team?
That's perfectly mirrored by institutional rigidity and compulsive process adherence. It's when teams loop behaviors not because they're effective, but because they've lost their adaptive dynamism.
So just doing things the way they've always been done, even if it's failing.
Exactly. No one questions the outdated protocol. It's overregulation leading to inflexibility. A team stuck in a predictable yet totally unproductive rut, unable to innovate or respond.
And the last one, the globus pallidus and motor dysfunction. That sounds like a team that just can't get anything done, even if they know what to do.
Precisely. A breakdown in social gate 3 here echoes breakdowns in execution and coordination. Tasks just don't translate into coordinated action. Roles, timing, it all falls out of sync. Functional fragmentation.
So the team knows the goal, but they just can't move forward. Collective paralysis.
That's exactly it. Stuck, unable to initiate or follow through.
This social glue idea is so compelling. It's not about the project plan or the org chart, is it? It's deeper.
A bit deeper.
That unspoken rhythm, the pulse of mutual awareness, the unspoken dance of a truly synchronized group. Without those precise transporters of alignment, the people who manage context, filter overload, integrate signals, the team really does become noise, compulsion, or paralysis.
Makes you wonder what's truly holding us together or pulling us apart.
Yeah.
And here's where it gets really critical. It shifts from powerful allegory to direct causation. The research asserts GOT3 is not only metaphorically important, but also mechanistically causal. In both directions of what Dave calls a biosocial feedback loop.
Mechanistically causal. So it's not just a nice way to think about it. It's actually happening biologically in groups. Tell me more about that.
Yeah, this is where emerging science, particularly using techniques like hyperscanning.
Measuring multiple brains at once.
Exactly. Simultaneous fMRI or EEG of multiple people interacting. It shows that truly effective teams exhibit interbrain synchrony. Their brains are literally firing in similar rhythms, almost like a shared consciousness, you could say.
Oh.
And this synchrony very often involves gamma oscillations, those brain rhythms we mentioned, which GAT3 directly helps modulate by controlling GABA levels.
So if my own internal brain coordination is off because of GAT3 imbalance,
it immediately impacts your capacity to coordinate with others. It leads to observable group dysfunction that we can actually measure. It's a tangible link.
That's incredible. So individual neurochemical regulation influenced by GAT3 directly governs my capacity for engagement, trust, social timing, coherence within a group.
Exactly. It explains why some people seem to effortlessly contribute to group flow, while others consistently disrupt it, sometimes without even meaning to.
And the feedback loop part, how does that work?
Well, here's the crucial bit. When enough individuals in a group are dysregulated, maybe from chronic stress, poor sleep, trauma, toxins, whatever team-level dysfunction emerges, it's a consequence of these aggregated individual states.
Okay, that makes sense.
But it doesn't stop there. Conversely, dysfunctional team environments, high conflict, low trust, constant chaos, they feed back into the participants' neurobiology.
Seriously, the team environment changes my brain chemistry.
It literally alters their GABA levels, further disrupts their neural synchrony, and reinforces those maladaptive patterns. It becomes a relentless, vicious cycle that can really dig itself in over time.
This points to a totally new frontier then. What does Dave's call it? Team neuroecology.
Yes, a field where group dynamics aren't just abstract sociological ideas, but emergent properties of interacting neural systems embedded in shared space and time.
So what this all means is human collaboration is fundamentally a neurobiological phenomenon, built molecule by molecule, moment by moment. It's not just strategy, it's physiology.
Deeply physiologically rooted, making our collective success incredibly vulnerable to these micro-level disturbances.
And this whole system, this dance, it's incredibly sensitive, isn't it?
Highly sensitive, GAT3 is a dynamic mediator. It's really susceptible to a wide range of inputs, environmental, physiological, relational. Any number of factors can subtly influence its expression or function,
Degrading that precise inhibitory gating.
and in turn unraveling cognitive coherence, individually and collectively.
So what are these triggers? What are the factors that can disrupt GAT3 and unravel our inner coherence and by extension our collective harmony? What should we be aware of?
Well, there's a surprisingly wide range. Firstly, and this is a big one, chronic stress and glucocorticoid exposure. Prolonged stress elevates cortisol.
The stress hormone.
Right. And that likely impairs GAT3's function, maybe even its production, leading to loss of inhibitory control, disrupted coordination. Think how hard it is to focus or connect when you're chronically stressed out.
Definitely. What else?
Secondly, neuroinflammation and immune signaling. Pro-inflammatory states in the brain, maybe from illness or other factors, can directly impair GABA uptake transporters like GAT3. That contributes to hyperexcitability or maybe getting stuck in repetitive thoughts, like brain static.
And it sounds like this isn't just about stress or illness, but maybe our genes, our environment too.
Absolutely. Epigenetic modifications, those are changes in how genes are read, not changes to the DNA itself. They can actually silence the gene for GAT3 SLC6811, leading to long-term reductions in the transporter.
Wow.
Then there are various psychotropic drugs, things like SSRIs, antiepileptics, benzodiazepines, even alcohol. They can indirectly cause the brain to downregulate or alter GAT3 as it tries to compensate for the drug's effects. Unintended ripple effects.
So things we take for health or even pleasure can impact this really subtle but critical system. That's quite sobering.
It is. And consider hormonal fluctuations. Estrogen and progesterone, for instance, modulate GABA tone and influence GAT3 expression in glial cells, the brain's support cells. This affects emotional and cognitive coordination.
Explain some mood shifts tied to hormones, maybe?
Potentially, yes. Furthermore, the whole field around diet, gut microbiota, and metabolic state is exploding. The gut-brain axis significantly impacts GABA synthesis and degradation, and that could influence GAT3 expression too, affecting mood, attention, cognition.
Truly, everything seems connected. Our plate to our performance. What about just our basic biology, things we're born with?
That brings us to genetic polymorphisms, just variations in the GAT3 gene itself, SLC6L1. Some people might have versions that are just baseline less efficient at inhibitory tuning, affecting their capacity to synchronize internally and externally.
And the environment.
Yeah.
Toxins.
Unfortunately, yes. Environmental toxins and endocrine disruptors, things like BPA, phthalates, pesticides, heavy metals, they can directly disrupt GABAergic signaling, potentially affecting GAT3, often hidden threats in daily life.
This list does make me think about my sleep habits, and probably many of our listeners too. Is that on here?
Oh, it is indeed.
No.
A major one. Sleep deprivation and circadian disruption significantly alters GABA levels and transporter regulation. Profoundly impairs gating mechanisms.
Leading to
poor decision-making, reduced emotional regulation, interpersonal misattunement. You just don't function well. Finally, even social isolation or deprivation of meaningful interaction can alter the expression of GABA-related genes, potentially including GAT3. It undermines individual resilience and the capacity to attune with others.
The big picture here is, well, it's profound. Any of these factors, from chronic stress to genetics, diet to sleep, they can initiate these microcascade effects in our neural networks.
Starts as a localized gating failure.
Like a tiny crack in a dam.
And it ripples outward, spreading into widespread cognitive and emotional incoherence. A silent, biological unraveling with potentially massive visible consequences in our lives and our groups.
Yeah, building on that idea of microcascades, the research meticulously details what's called the disruption trigger cycle.
Okay.
This cycle shows exactly how a single emotional spark, a seemingly localized neurobiological event in one person, can ignite a systemic breakdown in group coordination and performance. Daves even calls it a neural-to-social epileptic neurostorm.
Whoa, an epileptic neurostorm. That's a powerful, almost frightening image. Conveys the speed and intensity, right?
It really does.
So how does this neurostorm actually begin? What kicks off phase one? Individual emotive trigger in neurochemical collapse.
It always starts with a perceived threat, or maybe criticism, a sense of betrayal, even just ambiguity that gets interpreted negatively. This immediately activates the amygdala.
The brain's threat detector, the salient filter. Exactly. It prioritizes emotionally relevant signals, especially fear, mistrust, perceived danger. And this activation is particularly strong if the context is already emotionally charged or if there's unresolved tensions simmering under the surface.
And when the amygdala takes over like that, our rational brain, it gets hijacked, right? Takes a backseat.
Completely. High amygdala activation slams the brakes on top-down control from the prefrontal cortex, the PFC.
Our rational assessment impulse control center.
Right. So the individual effectively enters a limbic dominant state. Their primal emotional brain is running the show. They become hypervigilant, emotionally reactive, much less able to interpret nuance or inhibit inappropriate responses, empathy, strategic thinking, temporarily offline.
So their internal social gating system for smooth interaction is basically offline, not filtering information or reactions properly.
Correct. This intense emotional arousal directly dysregulates GABA clearance, often via that impaired GAT3 function we discussed, and this leads to one of two extremes. Either emotional flooding, too little inhibition, emotions overwhelm, maybe an outburst or panic, or affective flattening, too much inhibition, causing disconnection, emotional numbness. Crucially, the temporal coordination of neural signals collapses,
Leading to
disorganized speech, distorted perception, poorly timed behavior. This internal chaos then manifests outwardly. An emotional outburst, passive withdrawal, sarcasm, stonewalling, constant interrupting.
their internal dissonance projected outward.
Exactly. Their social gating system is offline.
Yeah.
They misread cues, project internal static, and unknowingly, they become a vector for disruption. And here's where it gets really interesting, because that's just the individual starting point.
And then it spreads. Phase 2, interpersonal transmission and emotional contagion, like a virus. How do our brains pick up on this dysregulated state, often without us realizing?
Humans are biologically wired for non-conscious affective synchronization. Stephen Porges calls it neuroception. Below conscious awareness, others subconsciously detect the dysregulated person's subtle microexpressions. Their tone shifts, body language, tense shoulders, restless feet, even autonomic signals.
And our mirror neurons kick in.
Our mirror neuron system starts simulating the observed emotional state internally. It's like a silent, nonverbal broadcast of unease.
So I might suddenly start feeling anxious or uneasy myself just because someone else in the room is dysregulated and my brain's picking up their signal. It's not a choice, it's biological.
Precisely. The observer's amygdalae, their insular cortices for emotional awareness, their anterior cingulate cortex for conflict monitoring, they start to co-activate. The initial trigger spreads like ripples as others feel unsettled, anxious, irritated, maybe confused, often without knowing why.
And it gets worse if people are already stressed or tired.
That's when it can become really problematic. If observers are already near emotional saturation fatigue, prior conflict, cognitive overload, the incoming signal pushes them past their own gating threshold.
Disrupting their GAT3 GABA balance, too.
Exactly. They start losing their own temporal and emotional regulation. They become part of the spreading disarray.
Which leads straight to phase 3, aggregated breakdown and macro dysfunctions. Once enough people are dysregulated, the whole group starts to unravel, losing cohesion.
That's exactly what happens. Dysregulated individuals start triggering each other in these recursive, accelerating loops.
Like what?
A withdrawal by one person is read as contempt by another. Intensity is seen as aggression. An attempt to control is felt as invalidation. Each response becomes a new trigger, magnifying the disturbance exponentially.
So what started as internal desynchronization in one brain?
Becomes systemic desynchronization of the whole group.
The team literally loses its rhythm, its flow, its ability to function as one unit.
Yes. Timing is lost. People talk over each other or fall into awkward silence. Roles blur, or they harden rigidly as people retreat into coping mechanisms. Trust erodes. Communication devolves into fragments, looping debates, emotional avoidance.
And strikingly, the group starts showing the same 3 pathologies we saw in the dysregulated brain.
Exactly the same one.
Remind us again how those manifest at the group level.
Okay, first, seizure. Think chaotic, unfocused energy. Meetings become noisy, emotionally charged, too much unfiltered talk, no agenda, nothing resolved, everyone talking, no one hearing.
In there, second.
Second, compulsion, stubborn rigidity. The team clings to outdated processes despite failure, repeating unhelpful actions, insisting on following the rules even if the rules are breaking them.
Got it. And third.
Third, paralysis. Total coordination loss. The team might know what needs done, but they can't execute. Initiative fails. Freezing, stalling, complete inability to move forward.
It's fascinating and kind of unnerving how the patterns in a dysregulated brain's EEG noise, disordered rhythms, looping signals are visible behaviorally in the speech, body language, workflow, decision-making of misaligned team.
It's truly a mirror image, from brain to boardroom, neural networks to social networks.
This all makes so much sense. connecting individual biology to group dynamics. But what about deeper stuff? Pre-existing vulnerabilities, like unresolved trauma. It sounds like Dr. Sora Shin's work is absolutely critical here, providing a neurobiological lens on how past wounds can sabotage present
Oh,
interactions.
absolutely crucial. Her NIH-funded work helps us understand these latent fault lines within us. She identified the thalamic nucleus reunions.
Okay, the what?
The thalamic nucleus reunions. Think of it as a central switchboard or a vital bridge. It connects two incredibly important brain regions. The prefrontal cortex, our executive control center for rational thought, decisions, impulse control,
Right.
with the hippocampus vital for memory, context, spatial awareness. It's where our present experience gets integrated with our past.
Oh, and how does early life trauma mess with this specific vital circuit? Does it literally rewire the brain?
Unfortunately, yes. Early life trauma, especially if it's chronic or severe, profoundly impairs the healthy development of this circuit. And this creates three converging, often hidden vulnerabilities.
Three vulnerabilities, like what?
First, heightened amygdala reactivity. The brain gets primed, wired to interpret ambiguous stuff as threats, even when it's not, like a hyperactive smoke alarm.
Constantly seeing danger.
Second, dysregulated impulse control. The weakened connectivity impairs the prefrontal cortex's override function. Raw, unfiltered emotional signals dominate responses instead of reasoned thought.
Okay, and third.
Third, pathological aggression and attention dysfunctions. Shin's research specifically found that calcium channel issues in this circuit can lead directly to impulsive aggressive behavior and severe attention fragmentation, difficulty focusing, sustaining concentration.
So this neuroarchitecture forms a kind of latent fault line within someone's emotional processing. It's there, dormant, waiting, ready to be triggered by something seemingly small, but the reaction can be huge.
Precisely. Like an old wound that never quite healed, ready to be reopened, it can stay hidden, a silent vulnerability, until activated by a seemingly minor relational stimulus.
Like what kind of stimulus?
Could be a perceived slight in a meeting, a certain tone of voice, even just being ignored during a stressful decision. It might look insignificant externally, but the internal neurobiological reaction can be immense because it's hitting that pre-existing vulnerability.
Which brings us to trauma's activation sequence, from that micro trigger to a macro consequence. How does that actually play out in a team setting, turning a small interaction into a big disruption?
Okay, imagine a typical team interaction. Maybe critical feedback, an ambiguous leadership cue, something that leaves room for misinterpretation.
Yeah.
For someone with this pre-encoded trauma, that interaction doesn't get processed just in the present. Instead, the nucleus reunions misfires. It intersects with a stored memory trace from a past traumatic episode, childhood, adolescence, whenever. The brain reactivates that earlier emotional context. Helplessness, rejection, abandonment, threat.
So the reaction might not match the current situation.
But it is neurobiologically appropriate to the relived context. Their brain is acting as if the old trauma is happening right now.
So what looks like an irrational, out of proportion overreaction to the rest of the team is, from that person's brain perspective, a perfectly logical, though misdirected response to a perceived reactivated threat.
Exactly. It's not intentional malice. It's a circuit-driven output.
And the behavior that emerges.
Things like impulsive hostility, passive sabotage, and intense need for control, sudden withdrawal. These aren't strategic choices. They are circuit-driven outputs from a dysregulated system. And this is where Get3 dysregulation and inhibitory failure compounds it. Too much emotional signal flooding the system, not enough precise gating.
So they lose coherent social timing, emotional modulation, accurate interpretation.
Exactly. They effectively project their internal dissonance and past pain outward, creating that ripple effect we talked about.
And then that dysregulated state spreads through neuroception, mirrored responses. The other team members pick up on this unease, even unconsciously.
Yes, as this state emerges in one person, others subconsciously detect the mismatch. Subtle shifts in posture, microexpressions, tone, pacing. This activates their own mirror neurons and limbic circuits. Their amygdalae flare. Cognitive resources get diverted to assessing what's going on, am I safe?
And if others also carry latent trauma,
It can reawaken their own early threat pathways, compounding the group destabilization, creating a rapid chain reaction of anxiety or defensiveness.
so the triggered individual essentially becomes a social transmitter, radiating threat perception across the group. This is not bad behavior in the traditional sense.
It is network neurobiology playing out in social space, a biological cascade with social consequences. That's the critical insight. It's transformative,
The trauma-encoded brain becomes a signal amplifier.
distorting shared attention, group timing, just like disrupted GABA transporters distort synchrony in the brain. Over time, if this happens repeatedly, the group itself enters collective dysregulation. Meetings get erratic, roles collapse or harden, group memory, their shared story fragments, attention scatters.
Then projects stall, decisions devolve into binary conflicts, the group fight or freeze response.
Exactly. And Shin's findings on nucleus reunions, miscommunication, impaired emotion memory integration, aggression, they perfectly mirror these team dysfunctions. It offers a profound diagnostic lens.
The parallels are startling, brain and group mirroring each other.
They really are. A prefrontal hippocampal disconnection in the individual brain leads to loss of context in group decisions. Amygdala hyperactivation mirrors the group entering threat mode, defensiveness, silence, aggression. GABA3 imbalance reflects emotional gating, failing in the team overload or numbness. Seizure-like aggression or freezing in the brain manifests as argument spirals, silent disengagement, mission drift in the group. Cortical disintegration parallels the breakdown of roles and collective cognition.
So trauma is fundamentally a network disruptor.
It is, and unless teams deliberately build gating rituals, de-escalation techniques, grounding rhythms, clear communication frameworks, a single triggered trauma circuit can literally derail an entire institutional dynamic, silently undermining its capacity to function.
Okay, we often hear about oxytocin as just the love hormone, right? Simplifying its role in bonding and trust. But it sounds like the research you mentioned from the architecture of bonding and entropy by design presents a way more complex, almost dualistic picture.
That's absolutely right. It's much more nuanced than just the love hormone label suggests.
So how does oxytocin play this powerful contradictory role, acting as both a bonding agent and, paradoxically, a potential driver of breakdown and fragmentation?
Well, oxytocin is central to emotional resonance, relational trust, group synchrony. It definitely buffers against trauma, supports bonding, enables genuine group formation. However, the research reveals it also functions as a critical neurochemical gatekeeper.
Okay.
It determines whether the brain can effectively buffer and redirect trauma responses in social settings, or, conversely, amplify them.
So it can go either way.
Exactly. When oxytocin is correctly regulated, abundant in healthy contexts, it mediates healthy, secure bonding.
Yeah.
But when it's dysregulated, maybe due to early trauma, endocrine disruptors in the environment, even excessive digital saturation, it becomes a vector for emotive fragmentation.
A vector, meaning it carries the dysfunction.
Yes, it can lead to false or unhealthy bonds and cascading dysfunction across human systems. It's like a key that can either unlock connection or lock us into destructive patterns.
That's a huge difference, genuine connection versus potentially harmful attachment. And the research even highlights striking gender dynamics and how this dysregulation plays out. Men and women experience it differently.
Yes, the research suggests distinct patterns with distinct consequences. According to Othniel Max Daves's work in Entropy by Design, in men, low oxytocin often linked to things like perinatal stress, neurochemical disruption from environmental factors like, say, soy oil exposure or chronic digital overstimulation.
Like too much gaming or porn.
Exactly. That low oxytocin can lead to a profound set of outcomes. Impaired empathy, increased aggression, a kind of developmental arrest hindering emotional maturity, a disconnection from emotional reciprocity.
Wow.
This can drive compensatory addiction to dopamine-seeking behaviors, a search for external stimulation to fill an internal void. Ultimately, it's described as a significant breakdown in emotional regulation, the ability to form secure bonds, sometimes even leading to a collapse of identity.
So for men, it can be this erosion of connection and emotional capacity. And for women, what does the architecture of bonding reveal about misdirected or elevated oxytocin, which sounds equally, if differently, destructive?
In women, misdirected or paradoxically chronically elevated oxytocin, especially combined with trauma, can lead to overattachment, to unsafe partners, or dysfunctional institutions.
Okay.
This often manifests as chronic emotional labor, feeling compelled to manage everyone else's emotions, and deep-seated codependency. It can even lead, the research suggests, to maternal detachment or intergenerational attachment disorder, passing dysfunction down generations.
That's heavy.
The research also links it to increased instances of gender dysphoria and a kind of affective dislocation from womanhood itself. Women might experience relentless overfunctioning, leading to severe burnout and a sense of disaffiliation with their own gender identity.
So both patterns, though different, low in men, misdirected, elevated in women, lead to emotive fragmentation and unhealthy relational patterns. It's not just personal, It's a systemic vulnerability impacting how entire populations relate.
Precisely. Oxytocin, with this potent dual nature, is then a critical amplifier and transmission medium in that cascade we discussed. Pre-existing oxytocin dysregulation primes the brain to react in very specific, often maladaptive ways to social stress.
Like overreacting or forming unhealthy attachments.
Exactly. For example, priming for female hypervigilance, scrutinizing every cue for threat or male fight-or-flight responses. Aggression or withdrawal become defaults. It drives misattachment trauma bonds, codependency, or emotional withdrawal, like male dissociation.
So when a trigger happens in a group perceived betrayal, conflict.
It activates latent trauma, bypassing cortical regulation because the oxytocin buffering is insufficient or dysregulated. The internal biological state then governs the external reaction.
And then the individual's behavior aggression, withdrawal, overfunctioning becomes a neurobiological signal, not just a conscious choice, a message from their dysregulated system.
Exactly. A signal picked up by others via mirror neurons and neuroception. And then others react with their own oxytocin-mediated patterns, often similarly dysregulated. Women, maybe with misdirected or exhausted systems, might become overly accommodating, performative, or subtly competitive. Men, maybe with low oxytocin and high cortisol, might default to dominance, aggression, or strategic withdrawal. The whole group destabilizes, mirroring the disrupted neural networks, amplifying the original signal.
So we're talking about a chemical misfire in one brain literally becoming an emotional misfire in a team, and ultimately maybe even a symbolic misfire in society, systemic amplification.
The documents really emphasize that oxytocin disruption is a profound systems phenomenon. Its effects scale seamlessly from individual neural circuits to intimate relationships, all the way to the foundational architecture of civilization.
Wow.
It reveals oxytocin dysregulation, especially with pre-encoded trauma, as a core vulnerability, undermining crucial aspects of our collective function. Our emotional rhythm and timing, collective synchrony, authenticity and feedback and connection, stability and identity in gender roles, and maybe most critically, foundational trust in authority, institutions, each other.
So when this intricate system is compromised, the very fabric of human connection weakens, leading to misattunement and societal entropy.
That's the stark picture painted by the research.
This sounds like a truly insidious problem, one that just gets worse, where attempts to fix things actually make them more broken. Digging us deeper, the paper talks about pathological negative feedback loops. What exactly are those? How do they manifest neurologically within the brain?
You've hit on a critical and, frankly, chilling point. Normally, negative feedback loops are regulatory, like a thermostat, restoring balance, preventing runaway processes.
Right, they're supposed to be helpful.
But when they're chronically activated or contextually misaligned because of underlying damage, they become pathological. They inadvertently amplify the very dysfunction they're meant to contain.
Okay, how does that look neurologically?
At the microneurological level, say when GAT3 is impaired by trauma, toxins, stress, the normal reuptake of neurotransmitters gets disrupted, destabilizing that excitation-inhibition balance.
So the brain tries to compensate to regain control, but those attempts just make it worse.
Yes, that's the paradox.
Yeah.
The brain attempts to compensate, maybe increasing suppression elsewhere, altering receptor sensitivity, but these efforts often backfire, amplifying the initial disruption, leading to what Dave calls loop dysfunction.
Manifesting as
Neurological stuff like localized seizures, widespread inhibitory breakdowns, motor or affective rigidity. Over time, the chronic outcome is neural dysrhythmia, loss of the brain's healthy rhythms, and severe cognitive fatigue. The brain is literally trapped, trying to fix itself, but only making things more broken, exhausted, and inefficient.
and at the macroneurological level across larger brain systems.
There, the initiating disruption often involves region-wide desynchronization, like in that critical thalamus-hippocampus pathway Dr. Shin studied, disrupted by trauma. The brain tries to cope, suppress the emotional overload via networks like the prefrontal cortex.
But if that suppression is inadequate or becomes rigid itself,
It results in emotional dissociation, feeling disconnected from emotions and impulsive aggression. This quickly leads to a degenerative cycle of maladaptive compensations, reinforcing the aggression and cognitive decline. The whole brain system gets caught in a destructive, self-amplifying loop. Its own attempts at regulation become part of the problem.
it's incredible how these patterns scale. Now, how do these pathological loops play out psychologically for an individual and then spreading within a group?
At the micropsychological level, it often starts with an individual's pre-encoded trauma or oxytocin imbalance, skewing their emotional regulation. To cope, they might resort to extreme avoidance, hypervigilance for threats, or over-identifying with roles, the rescuer, the problem solver, to suppress internal chaos and feel in control.
But that creates a loop.
A loop dysfunction, yes, where avoidance deepens disconnection, reinforcing attachment wounds, identity confusion, paradoxically making the things they fear more likely. The chronic outcomes, reduced secure bonding, compulsive overcontrol, burnout, heightened emotional reactivity that pushes others away.
And in a group, at the macro-psychological level, how does that dysfunctional spiral manifest?
When one member gets triggered, it causes shared emotional destabilization via contagion. Others might instinctively mimic the state, suppress their own reactions, or deflect tension onto someone else.
Creating a loop dysfunction
where defensive group behaviors escalate. Think constant scapegoating, pervasive silence in meetings where crucial issues are ignored, rapid tribal sorting into unhelpful factions. The chronic outcome is a self-reinforcing spiral of eroded trust, declining psychological safety, crippling collaborative decline. The group becomes less than the sum of its parts.
That sounds like so many team conflicts I've witnessed or been part of, like a group trapped in this toxic, self-perpetuating dance where every step reinforces the dysfunction.
It's a very common pattern, unfortunately.
And what about sociologically, when entire institutions or societies get caught in these loops?
At the microsociological level, Daves talks about institutional overreach, where intimate human connections get replaced by cold, bureaucratic policy allegiance. Individuals feel compelled to channel their emotional labor, even their identity, into bureaucratic systems for belonging, rather than authentic human relationships.
Creating a loop dysfunction of
fusing personal identity with the institution, disabling authentic external relationships. The chronic outcomes are depersonalization, moral displacement where ethics are dictated by the institution, and erosion of family and broader social structures, leaving people isolated even within large systems.
That's powerful. Institutions inadvertently undermining the very human connections they ostensibly serve, creating hollow belonging. And at the macro-sociological level, when society itself is under widespread stress and trauma.
When widespread trauma diminishes social trust and coherence, governments or communities often try to artificially restore order through top-down policies, rigid regulations, compelling ideologies.
But this can backfire,
leading to a loop dysfunction where these very systems inadvertently reinforce the trauma they meant to alleviate. By suppressing dissent, over-regulating emotions, incentivizing ideological purity, they create a chilling effect on authentic human interaction.
A chronic outcome.
A deeply fragmented society. Extreme polarization, where dialogue collapses. Institutional sclerosis systems become rigid, unresponsive, unable to adapt or serve the people.
What's truly fascinating here and deeply alarming is that at every single level, neural, personal, collective, societal, polarity, these maladaptive regulatory attempts meant to contain breakdown
can recursively reinforce it. It's a unifying factor.
Especially when core relational or inhibitory systems are already damaged.
Exactly. The very effort to self-regulate, control, bring order, paradoxically leads to a more entrenched pathological state if the underlying biological or relational foundations aren't genuinely addressed. We become our own worst enemy, fixing symptoms without understanding the deep biological mechanics.
This research is pulling so many threads together, showing how deeply, irrevocably intertwined our individual biology is with our collective experience. Which brings us to what the paper calls the confluence paradigm. What's the core synthesis here? What's the unifying pattern binding all these levels of dysfunction?
The confluence paradigm posits a single, unified, and quite alarming pattern. It runs like a dark thread through all human systems. What fractures the coherence of the individual mind inevitably scales outward, almost like a fractal pattern.
Fracturing the coherence of collective bodies, teams, institutions, nations.
Exactly. This deep dive has meticulously traced that exact path. From the infinitesimal molecular microlevel, the action of a single protein like GAT3, to the sprawling, visible societal macro level.
Revealing that disruptions in our neural coordination, our basic emotional regulation, they're not isolated pathologies.
Not confined to one person, no. They're systemic vulnerabilities, deeply embedded within both the intricate architecture of the brain and the complex, often fragile architecture of society itself.
And crucially, this goes beyond just metaphor, right? It's not just a clever analogy. It's asserting biological fact as social prophecy. The biological mechanisms are the social mechanisms.
Absolutely. Take GAT3 again. The metaphor isn't just analogy, it's diagnostic. Individual neurochemical dysregulation influenced by impaired GAT3 projects directly into the relational field as observable team dysfunction.
So the brain's failure to gate inhibition is structurally, dynamically identical to how teams collapse when regulation fails.
Exactly. When a meeting descends into chaos or becomes rigid and repetitive, you are witnessing the social equivalent of a brain struggling with GAT3 dysregulation. It's a literal biological blueprint for collective breakdown, playing out in real time.
And Dr. Shin's trauma research reinforces this undeniable link, showing how early adversity alters gating mechanisms, manifesting as interpersonal volatility later.
Yes. Her work on the thalamic nucleus reunions reveals the rewired circuits of a traumatized brain, compromised executive control. Contextual memory directly lead to behaviors like impulsive aggression, rigid control, emotional withdrawal. This isn't psychology as metaphor.
It's neurology as social prophecy.
Precisely. The individual's internal, often unconscious experience of past trauma becomes the group's external disruptive reality, triggering that chain reaction of fear and defensiveness. And then, of course, there's oxytocin.
The ultimate social amplifier or disruptor, not just the love hormone, but this complex neuromodulatory architecture governing social connection.
Exactly. Governing trust, reciprocity, moral alignment. Its specific gender dysregulation leads to profound societal fragmentation, affecting empathy, self-regulation, identity stability, gender roles, and ultimately collective trust in authority and institutions.
When this critical system is compromised, the capacity for human connection just weakens, leading to misattunement, isolation, social decay.
That's the implication.
So we're talking about a systemic and self-amplifying nature of breakdown. One small misfire, maybe even molecular, cascading into a wildfire, consuming relationships, teams, societies. It sounds almost inevitable sometimes.
Precisely. The research illustrates this terrifying cascade. Pre-encoded trauma meets neurochemical vulnerability like dysregulated GAT3 or oxytocin, triggering behavioral misfires. These resonate powerfully across the social field, picked up via neuroception, mirror neurons.
Each reaction becomes the stimulus for the next,
Amplifying the disturbance. A recursive loop. A seemingly isolated childhood wound or hormonal imbalance can, by degrees, become the pervasive ambient tone of meetings, leading to decaying institutional trust, collapsed creativity, even the moral disorientation of leadership.
So just like neural coordination isn't localized, group failure isn't reducible to one cause.
It's a network event. Systemic, recursive, self-amplifying, unless conscious, countercoherent force bravely steps in to interrupt it, which raises a profoundly important question for all of us.
Okay, this sounds incredibly complex, maybe even overwhelming. If the roots of our collective dysfunction are so deep, so neurobiological, tied up with trauma and subtle chemical balances, why do our traditional solutions often fail so spectacularly? Why do we keep making the same mistakes?
Well, traditional solutions, generic conflict resolution workshops, new communication protocols, workflow management systems, they often fail precisely because they only address the outer behavior, the symptoms of group dysfunction.
Not the underlying neurobiological root of the collapse.
Exactly. They don't account for how emotional contagion spreads virally, or how neurochemical disruptions literally undermine the very capacity for trust, empathy, coordinated action. They're essentially treating a deep systemic infection with a superficial bandage.
Focusing on symptoms, not the cause embedded in our biology. A category error leading to frustration and failure.
That's a good way to put it.
So if we truly want to build more resilient teams, functional institutions, a more coherent society, what are the practical steps? How do we start building these social gating mechanisms that mirror the brain's health? Where do we even start?
Fundamentally, it starts with a deeper awareness, moving beyond just simple observation. Leaders, team members, need to be attuned to subtle cues of individual internal dysregulation before overt conflict erupts.
Like what kinds of cues?
Shifts in speech rhythm, avoiding eye contact, tone changes, subtle body tension. These are often the first outward signs of internal neurochemical stress, a compromised gating system.
Okay, recognize early signs. What's next?
Second, we need to actively interrupt emotional feedback loops. Use intentional deactivation rituals. This might mean structured breathing exercise at the start of a tense meeting, brief periods of collective silence for self-regulation, deliberately redirecting attention to a neutral, shared goal to break the cycle of escalating emotional responses.
Like consciously hitting a neural reset button for the group, pausing, recentering. A collective breath that's so different from just powering through.
Exactly. Third, Teams need to consciously build shared social GAP3 equivalents, explicit norms and structures that regulate information flow and emotional responses,
Chat.
actively fostering psychological safety where everyone feels safe to speak truth without fear, establishing clear communication and timing norms one voice at a time. We take turns, consistently cultivating trust through transparent actions, predictable responses. This creates collective coherence, mirroring the brain's precise gating.
Okay, and after things do go wrong.
Fourth, we must integrate recovery mechanisms. Just as neural circuits need restabilization, teams need deliberate processes for recovery after stress or conflict, debriefings tailored to emotional impact, explicit strategies to rebuild trust after a breach, rituals for collective grounding after a high-stakes project.
And given everything about trauma's pervasive impact, trauma-informed leadership sounds, well, not just beneficial, but absolutely crucial.
It absolutely is the cornerstone. Leaders must deeply understand that emotional volatility, overreactions, chronic conflict often stem not from ill intent, but from unresolved trauma interacting with complex neurochemical architectures.
So the response needs to be different.
Respond with deep empathy and a regulatory presence. Their own calm, grounded demeanor can be a powerful counter-coherent force. Focus on helping the individual or group regain internal balance, not just imposing behavioral correction or punishment. Understand the why behind the what.
This approach seems to move way beyond just team dynamics. It extends to a broader, almost visionary path for society. How do we even begin to reconstitute collective coherence on that massive scale? Mend the fractured biological commons.
It means we must regenerate emotional architecture, consciously restoring biologically grounded bonding frameworks in communities, families, realigning institutional systems, education, healthcare to support human-scale emotional rhythms, not just extractive performance metrics or efficiency, creating environments that genuinely nurture emotional well-being and connection.
Okay, regenerate emotional architecture. What else?
Second, reintegrate fragmented individuals. This means creating coherent relational environments where trauma can be metabolized and resolved, where individuals can truly heal and build meaningful, authentic relationships, not be left isolated in their pain.
So rebuilding trust and connection, ground up. One interaction, one relationship, one community at a time. It's a massive undertaking.
And finally, perhaps the most profound shift, resacralize the human encounter, fostering a culture where individuals are inherently viewed as carriers of meaning, worthy of profound trust and emotional investment.
Not just competitors, data points, or cogs in a machine.
Exactly. A deep recognition of the inherent value of human connection itself. A shift from a purely transactional view. This vision moves far beyond just individual therapy or top-down policy.
It requires more.
The restoration of healthy coordination within brains, within groups, within societies absolutely requires reconstituting meaning, trust, emotional regulation at all levels, building systems and cultures that honor, protect, and restore these fundamental neurobiological and relational microstates. They are the very foundation of our collective human future.
Wow. Today, we've taken a truly deep dive into this profound and, sometimes unsettling idea that our collective human function, how teams operate, institutions endure, societies thrive. It's not just good intentions or shared goals. It is deeply biologically rooted. It's about the intricate neurochemical dance within each of us and critically between us. Mediated by things like GAT3, oxytocin, or experience of trauma, it transforms our understanding of why things go wrong and what it truly takes to make them right.
It's a powerful and humbling perspective. Reminds us just how deeply interconnected we truly are, even at a molecular level.
Yeah.
Our social world, its triumphs, its failures, ultimately a reflection of our internal biological states and the balance within our shared biological commons.
So, as you go about your day in your teams, families, communities, consider this provocative thought. If the health of our societies is truly fundamentally a matter of neurochemistry, what profound responsibility does that place on us? Not just as individuals, but as active participants in these vast interconnected collective systems. What micro-level actions can you take a conscious pause, a moment of empathy, a commitment to genuine presence to contribute to the macro-level coherence around you?
Keep observing that hidden grammar of coordination in your own life. Notice when the rhythm shifts, when clarity dissolves into noise, when trust seems to unravel. You might just be witnessing, with new eyes, the subtle, powerful, and deeply biological forces that govern our collective future, and recognizing your own role in either amplifying or healing them.